With all the disappointing news lately in regard to the Assassin's Creed franchise, or I guess exciting news depending on your opinion, I've been pretty negative about Assassin's Creed lately. And although it is a lot of fun to make fun of these games, aka Odyssey and Valhalla, I figured, you know what, let's do something positive for Valhalla. I'd say it's a pretty controversial game among the fanbase. Some people hate it, some people love it, some people think anything's better than Odyssey, and some people don't care about Assassin's Creed but like Vikings. So I know everybody might cause a riot in the comments, but unfortunately we are going to have to skip the daily humiliation of Odyssey, because in this video we are here to talk about what Assassin's Creed Valhalla did right. So I'm sorry, I know, I'm sorry, but Odyssey is safe and off limits in this video. Now anyway, the first thing Assassin's Creed Valhalla did right is that it's not Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So that's definitely something, because that game is trash. But probably one of my favorite changes from Odyssey to Valhalla was how they dialed down the loot. Odyssey had an extremely bloated loot system. It was overwhelming, and you never even needed 95% of the weapons and armor you picked up. In Valhalla, it was very noticeably dialed down. I remember I played through about the first 2 to 3 hours of this game with the same gear, and not once having to go into my inventory to sort everything out. It was very easy, very focused. All my time could be put into upgrading and enhancing every piece of gear rather than swapping it out every 5 minutes, so that was great. Another thing I really enjoyed about Valhalla was their new design for the side content. Side quests and Origins and Odyssey were very annoying, to say the least. You would get dozens upon dozens of side quests piled up in your quest tab, most of which being copy and pasted filler and just straight up there to waste your time. You had to actually play a lot of these side quests as well. You didn't really have a choice, because you need to be a certain level to continue the main quest. It was grindy, very boring, and was solely there to make the game longer. However, I'd say for the most part, Valhalla completely solved that issue. For starters, there was no certain level you had to be to continue the main story. I mean, sure, there's a recommended power level, but I really never had to go out of my way to purposely increase my level like how I had to for Odyssey and Origins. I got the necessary power levels from just playing the main quest, so there's that, and also the long checklist of side quests were completely gone. Instead, there were brief world activities you stumbled upon in the world. They were often really short, most of them comedic, and I'd say pretty enjoyable. They weren't copy and pasted chores, and you can actually tell that real humans had designed and came up with these world activities. Now granted, I think a lot of that endless grind and filler missions were actually put into the main story, but we're here to talk about what the game did right, so we'll save that for another video. Now, even though I'm personally not a big fan of the combat from Valhalla, it definitely felt the best out of the previous 2 RPG games. While in Origins, and especially Odyssey, the combat felt very floaty and grindy. Enemies had inflated health pools, there wasn't much skill or variation involved in the combat, and it honestly felt extremely boring to me after the first few hours. And I can confidently say that while I don't love Valhalla's combat, it's at least better and improved. You can tell Ubisoft Montreal was aware of some of the issues with combat, and they tried to make it more strategic and skill-based. Which, I mean, it still really isn't, but it at least has some of that in there now. You can shoot guards in their weak spot to induce a downed state where you can stun attack them. There's a few more attacks you can do with the weapons, you can dual wield obviously, and the skill tree allows for more upgrades and new abilities. The combat certainly feels slower and more weighted when compared to Odyssey, which is definitely a good thing, because Odyssey felt like you were swinging lightsabers. And then obviously there's the finishers in Valhalla, which is probably my favorite part about the combat system, because those look pretty badass and add some much needed flair to the combat. Those finishers made me actually want to stun enemies more often so I could use them. Now, a major thing I feel Assassin's Creed Valhalla got right was the modern day storyline. I have not been interested in the modern day storyline since Black Flag, and Valhalla's was actually really intriguing to me. It took what Origins and Odyssey slowly built and finally made something out of it. Of course, seeing original characters like Sean and Rebecca were great, but also finally getting some understanding as to what happened after Desmond died and what condition the world was in was so good to finally hear about. And the ending was great. Basim entering the modern world and joining to help the assassins, and Layla finding and choosing to help Desmond, and those two possibly being able to escape eventually. For once, the modern day actually had me curious again for what happened next. It at least piqued my curiosity, and this is the one thing Valhalla will hopefully bring to the future games, and Ubisoft better not mess it up. Then again, it seems like that's their new brand these days, so who knows. The settlement system in Valhalla was also a new addition that I personally liked. Now, it certainly isn't perfect and it could have been much better, but I enjoyed the system. It almost reminded me of Monteriggioni from AC2. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. That is so hard to pronounce.
Monteriggioni.
And if it just had a little more depth or impact on the experience of the game, I think it could have been great. But nonetheless, I found it pretty cool to be able to expand your Viking settlement. And the final thing I think Valhalla did right was toning down the size of the open world. Now, in my opinion, the world is still a bit empty in many areas, and it doesn't have a ton of environmental variety, but at least it wasn't the overly sized, stuffed mess from Odyssey's ancient Greece. That world was massive and it was just way too big. Valhalla's world is a little more rich, and the world activities made it a lot more enjoyable to explore, along with some caves and tombs you could explore for extra rewards. It's not a perfect open world, but at least it's not too ridiculous in scale, so I think toning it down a level was definitely the right call. I know I haven't been the most positive about Valhalla lately, and it's kind of funny because when the game first came out, I think I was just blinded by the shiny newness of the game and wasn't as critical, but I definitely recognized its flaws more as I've had more time with it and time to formulate my opinion. But regardless, I still feel like there were some really good and solid improvements in Valhalla from Odyssey and even Origins in some parts. But let me know what you guys think of this in the comments and what you think Valhalla did right and maybe what it did wrong as well. If you enjoyed this video, I've made a lot of videos analyzing Assassin's Creed Valhalla if you want to check them out, and consider subscribing for more in the future. Other than that, thanks for watching everybody, and have a great day, Assassins.